I've got too many bills.
If you need funds, you can apply in minutes at cashnetusa.com and have the money in your account as soon as the same business day.
Okay, got it. Applying now.
They've been helping hardworking people cover emergency expenses since 2004.
Hey, look, I got it.
You've got this.
When you need money fast, be the hero. All loans subject to lender approval. Speed of funding is subject to verifications and your bank's processing times. See cashnetusa.com for more details.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right. We're talking about The Devil's Advocate on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from New York City. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we're dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack all the goriest details of 1997's The Devil's Advocate in the hopes that a law firm partner's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at his expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to discourage me from rubbing one out in the middle of my trial. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I thought you said I would be the only one you trust you to tell you in Spanish that your wife was cheating on you.
That is a joke I've written for later on.
I'm sorry. I used my infernal psychic powers to steal that joke from you.
It is interesting, I suppose. That guy is really troubled by this, but I have been on many a New York subway, obviously not as many as you do because you live in that town, but isn't that a conversation that happens on every other train you're on?
Somebody accuses your wife of being a whore. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, it's like, well, it must be Tuesday.
You paid your fare. That's for free.
Exactly.
Well, Gina, I don't want to scare you, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. Now, you may know him as a horror fan and a prominent LA-based entertainment lawyer, helping productions big and small get their movies made here in town. The one, the only Joshua Lastine. How are you doing today, Joshua?
Hey, Patrick. Hey, Gina. Hey, Kill by Kill. Thank you for having me be here. It's a pleasure.
This is a wonderful confluence of events. Every once in a while, we just pair the right guest with the right movie. And Gina had mentioned that she wanted to talk about The Devil's Advocate, and I put it in the bullpen. And then when your name came across my desk, I thought, well, this is the perfect way to talk about what is honestly a very weird piece of motion picture history.
One of my favorites.
Really? Now, When was the first time you watched The Devil's Advocate?
Goodness. I would have been a kid growing up, and they would have had repeats of the movie on TNT.
Oh, okay.
That, People Under the Stairs, Cape Fear. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I remember distinctly growing up as a kid. Just kind of like having on in the background, like even just doing like things like cleaning. Like I think my mom or something would have had it on in the background. And I remember seeing bits and pieces of that movie very early on. And then just falling in love and wanting to watch the whole thing, which I'm going to say I did. And I think I've seen it over 100 million times by now. One of my favorite movies in the top 20 for sure.
Really? Okay, interesting. Then buckle up, because I don't know that I'm going to treat it that well, but...
That's okay. I don't know that it holds up as well today, but it was still a favorite.
Listen, I love all sorts of what we like to call on the show. It may not be good, but it might be great movies. And certainly this would qualify. Gina, what about you? When did you see this cinematic achievement?
I didn't see it in the theater, but I have a very strong memory of renting it on DVD. Mm-hmm. And I watched it. My first thought was, this is one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen in my life. And then my second thought was, I think I love it.
Yeah. I can completely understand that because in terms, like, it's very beautifully photographed. I think there's a lot of attractive people in it. It certainly captures New York of a certain era, which is always nice to see a slice in time, as it were. I did want there to be a Friday the 13th Part 8 style DJ sort of preparing me for entering New York City. But unlike End of Days, this movie does not do that. And I think it's the one thing I missed most of all.
Yeah, no, it is joyously silly. We really should have done this back to back with End of Days because End of Days is just so dour and it takes itself so seriously. And this does none of those things and makes it an infinitely more. No, let me mistake it. Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron are taking it seriously, but nobody else involved in it is taking it seriously.
They're definitely focused on trying to make this as impactful as possible. I also think they're concentrating a lot on their accents, which
Yes.
it is a Scotch cornpone, as the bard would put it, veers slightly into foghorn leghorn. And obviously Charlize Theron, not of this country, coming from South Africa. So she's already battling one accent she's trying to get out of, and then wedge her way into this one is a tough ask. On top of the other acting tasks she's already been given. There's a lot going on for these two in this movie. And then you have Al Pacino, who's just taking pieces of scenery with a cake knife
and hamming it up.
Oh my God, he's just having the time of his life.
Would you believe that he was asked to do this film not once, not twice, but thrice, and kept turning it down? Basically saying, this is too obvious. You need to explore other options.
Too obvious for him to be playing the devil?
Yes. He was approached 3 times, once by another director and then finally by Hackford. And then he tells Taylor Hackford, the director here, this is very obvious for me to be doing this. You should reach out to somebody like Robert Redford. And Hackford's like, oh, okay, but I might be coming back around to you. And then he finally says yes once Keanu Reeves joins and then cuts his rate to make more money available for Al Pacino. So unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, this denied us the chance to hear Robert Redford tell a guy in the subway that his wife is having anal sex with his neighbor in Spanish. Something I think we would be better off as a society hearing. Maybe someone could hold a microphone up to him and he could do that for us pro bono.
We really missed out on Robert Redford very passionately saying the name Eddie BarZOOOM. Which became a quote in my household for just letting out Eddie BarZOOOM. Eddie BarZOOOM.
It is, oh boy.
You know, if we'd gotten a cat, if we'd had a cat around the time, we might have considered naming it Eddie BarZOOOM.
Well, if anyone knows anyone who's named their cat Eddie BarZOOOM, please let us know. We also, Gina, just for your edification, speaking of End of Days, a lot of people reached out on socials to let us know there is one other movie that has Flaming P, because we've covered 2 of them. Now there's a third, and that would be the Ghost Rider sequel has Flaming P involved in it.
Well,
so
we'll get to that in 2026.
It's on the books, baby. It's happening. We got to close out the trilogy. I think the sequel is a lot more interesting and fun. Talk about a Columbia movie that has some troubles. Is that first one? They don't know what to make of it. And they're really relying on the idea that if Nicolas Cage eats M&Ms out of a giant martini glass, Marvel fans will love it. I truly do not understand some of the decisions made in the film, but what are you going to do? Let's talk about some of the decisions made in The Devil's Advocate. Okay, this whole thing starts out actually as a novel by Andrew Niederman, whose name might sound familiar to some people. Gina, he wrote Pin, which is, probably is possibly the most possessed anatomical dummy movie of all time.
I mean, that's a small category, but yes.
Really, it might be a one of one, but it absolutely is that. Josh covered it on his podcast, and I felt like everyone there felt like that was their statement. I never wanted to step on their toes, but I do wonder eventually we'll probably have to cover Pin and have Megan on to talk about it, and Josh too. The novel version of this is more like What If the Firm but supernatural, where a young hotshot lawyer from upstate New York is recruited to an NYC practice where criminal cases appear in the firm's files before they occur in real life. And the head of the place is, named John Milton, the devil. What do you know? If you want to know more, former guest Brian Collins has a great write-up on Fangoria.com if you want to get into that. So that book is optioned pretty quickly after it's released in 1990, but things start to really heat up after the conclusion of the O.J. Simpson trial. And director Taylor Hackford, coming straight off of one of my favorite of his efforts, it might be the favorite of his efforts, Dolores Claiborne, is coming straight into this movie. And he responded to the material thusly. The courtroom has become the gladiators' arena of the late 20th century. Following the progress of a sensational trial is a spectacular sport. You're watching something that's part melodrama, part vaudeville, part cold-blooded calculation. And now that audiences have seen these televised trials, they realize that morality and justice have very little to do with the outcomes, which is a very cynical take, but I can't say that he's wrong. The winners are the lawyers who will stop at nothing. I thought it would be interesting to put that behavior into a larger context of right and wrong. I wanted to examine a character who's been rewarded all his life for being a winner, so that he's never stepped back to say that winning may not always be the best thing. Adding to that, a giant sculpture that fucks, I guess.
Well, there are some really, and as you say, we're not going to do a deep dive into this plot,
No,
because it's nonsense. But it brings some interesting ideas to the table. I think that for me, one of the most interesting aspects is Charlize Theron's character is essentially, let's call it reverse gaslit.
sure.
In which she knows something bad's happening. She knows that there are, the demons walk amongst us and that the devil is real. But everybody is telling her that she's wrong, that she's imagining these demons, when in fact she's actually not.
Right, yeah.
In most situations, it would be reversed, in which they are trying to convince her that it's demons causing all this.
It's an interesting reversal from the book, in which that character, which has a different name in that than Marianne, but in that, she embraces the evil. And it ends up that she actually comes out on top of this entire relationship, whereas her lawyer husband does not. It's a weird reversal.
Yeah, she's kind of the sacrificial lamb in all this.
Yeah.
And the original, the full real version of the story has never been adapted.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty much the same. You would basically be making a remake. But one of the big diversions are like the whole son of Satan thing. That is not in the book. And it becomes more of like, it really does feel like he picked up elements of the firm and said, how can I make this supernatural? Because it really involves these cases that they're litigating that the files already exist for, and then the crimes happen. This is more grandiose. It's more operatic, fitting a movie. Obviously, any adaptation, your goal is to take what works for the medium you're adapting it into and leave the rest behind. And I think they make some pretty smart decisions. It also allows Charlize Theron to have a real definitive arc over the course of the movie and really engage in that character. She's not secondary to the plot, really. She has a very juicy role, and I think she makes the most out of it, accent notwithstanding.
I really feel like her character is a reflection or homage to Rosemary's Baby. Just like the visions and the way that, like Judah said, she's kind of reverse gaslit. There's something going on here. She knows that there's something going on here, but she just can't quite.
You get right down to the chopping her hair off as a sign that all is not well with her emotionally. Yeah, I've written about this movie a little bit. I really do enjoy it for all of its nonsense. And I think that one of the most interesting things are these monologues that Al Pacino gives that basically says that, like, God is asleep at the wheel, And like, the devil interferes with humans because he likes them, actually.
Right.
And
he likes to mix it up.
Yeah, and I want some of them to succeed. And unfortunately, that also means having to give up your morals and perhaps either literally or figuratively sacrifice people to get there. But he does want you to do well for yourself on occasion.
A little bit like how Freddy Krueger really wanted to help people through their problems via dream therapy, and the only downside was they were dead at the end. The devil here is really a people pleaser who's trying to help people reach their dreams. It just involves selling your soul.
It's one of the earliest stories out there is a sell your soul, Faustian bargain, tick for tack. I'm giving up something in exchange for something from the devil. And that story is just very reflective, of humanity in general, just telling across all societies. To see it in this movie here done in such a grandiose way.
Yeah. The reason why the whole, turns out you're my son, and to bring on the antichrist, you have to have sex with your hot half-sister. That's sort of secondary almost, because I feel like the reason why he initially chooses him to, bring on to his, infernal law practice is because he is willing to grill this little girl. Well, she's not little. She's like a young teenager over, charges that her teacher molested her, even though he knows that his client did it. But it, still forges ahead and breaks down this kid and wins the case. Yes. And so he pegs him as this is a guy who will do whatever he has to do to win, even if he knows that his client is guilty.
And a lot of his self-worth seems to be wrapped up in something that I don't often see reported in, news sources, which is a lawyer's win-loss record. That is, I don't think people don't follow that the way they do baseball. But in the world of this movie, the fact that he's undefeated, it's some sort of calling card as opposed to just this. If he has above 500 as a defense lawyer, seems like you're doing well. Also, it would be better if you advised your client before this sort of sexual molestation trial to not rub one out in the midst of it, next to where the fucking jury is.
Yeah, don't be licking your lips at your victim's testimony.
I mean, there seems to be guilt by I can't put my glasses on correctly happening here is another thing, because as he gets more and more turned on, his glasses come more and more sideways and tilted on his face. It's real subtle work being done by this actor, and it's real fucking gross. Also, I don't think calling a guy a hog in classroom means, and then I made up a molestation story about him. The 1-2 punch here, I don't quite buy. And I mean, I know it's a movie. You don't come to movies for fucking realism. But this is still a bit of a stretch that a teenager groped other teenagers and then made them make up a story about this guy? I don't know.
That burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is a real bitch for criminal lawyers, pardon my French. Right. I don't practice criminal law, right? I just do transactional law. But, really have a high bar threshold to overcome as the prosecutor in a criminal case. You have to prove with 90.99999% accuracy that the defendant's guilty. And there's actually a quote in the movie, something to the effect of, what is it like to squeeze a guy through the door of reasonable doubt? And that's truly, I think, probably either to, again, these are fictitious cases in movies or whatever, but to open up the door to just one jury member to say, maybe he didn't do it. Both the child molestation and Craig T. Nelson coach, the triple homicide, I think his defense was that wasn't he having sex with his secretary? Allegedly?
Yeah, it really depends on whether or not that jury bought that secretary's testimony, and she can barely put up a front in front of Keanu Reeves. So she really must have stepped up to the plate in a big way during that trial. We're not allowed to see it. We just make sort of movie math that she testified they come out smiling. It must have gone well. It's a weird cut through for a movie that in its sort of unrated form is nearly 2.5 hours long. It's a long movie. Hey friends, no matter how you PU, wouldn't you rather smell good than stink up the joint like some kind of dirty peanut? Now you're probably saying to yourself, Patrick, I don't bathe in leftover toilet water like some kind of Jason Voorhees, and I believe you. But body odor happens to everybody, and often sooner than we'd like, which is why I'm so excited to talk about our sponsor today, Mando, because people, I'm already a happy customer. I have been using Mando's Pro Sport Body Wash and their Mount Fuji scented whole body deodorant stick for like over a year, and I can honestly say it works everywhere, and I mean everywhere. I slap that stick on my pits, feet, thighs, even those nether regions that we shan't discuss, and Mando blocks odor for up to 72 hours with the power of mandelic acid. And now, just for being a listener, you can smell like a beautiful Japanese mountainside with an insane deal on the Mando Starter Pack. It includes a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like a mini body wash and deodorant wipes, so you can smell better anywhere. We're talking 40% off when you use the code KILLPOD at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com, and enter KILLPOD at checkout to earn $5 off that starter pack of your choice, plus free shipping. Please, this is a fantastic way to support the show, so make sure you tell them that we sent you. So smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. And now, the better smelling body count continues. The other element to this film, and I'm glad you brought up End of Days, because one of the things that makes End of Days so tough to swallow is the devil's terrible fucking planning. He just sucks at recruitment. Whereas Al Pacino here as the devil is great at recruiting. He is everything the devil in End of Days is not. Also, apparently, I don't think you can shoot this one as easily as you can shoot Gabriel Byrd with a fucking grenade launcher, and then he gets run over with a train.
Yeah, no, you just defeat the devil here. He just like, you shakes his fist and just goes back to hell, I guess.
I guess. If it happened at all, because
Oh no, my hot daughter!
Oh no. He ghostbusts his hot daughter? Is that what happens? She dies by blue oopsie doodle? I don't know what comes out of him that makes her into a weird stone creature. But yeah, why does she have to die in this scenario? Is that just anger on his part, Gina?
You get to the scene where Eddie BarZOOOOM gets killed. You've got to indulge me and let me read this monologue that Al Pacino gives while this character, played by one Jeffrey Jones, is beaten to death by sticks by angry demon homeless people.
Gina, why wait? The time is now.
Okay, so Eddie BarZOOOOM is a colleague in this law firm. He's going to report Al Pacino, not because, he takes on, because he's the devil and most of his law firm is staffed by demons, but because he's pissed that Keanu Reeves been brought on as a partner, and I guess, he's a little jealous of this.
But also, he's a terrible lawyer.
He's
shredding stuff in the middle of the night. He does not come off as a competent dude. And it also does not help that the character is portrayed by someone with a not great rap sheet, one Jeffrey Seymour
I'm not going to say. I mean, it's absolutely satisfying to see him getting beaten to death with sticks by homeless people. It's a highlight of the movie for me, honestly. It happens while Al Pacino is saying this to a absolutely befuddled Keanu Reeves. As they're scrambling from one deal to the next, who's got his eye on the planet? As the air thickens, the water sours, even the bee's honey takes on the metallic taste of radioactivity. And it just keeps coming faster and faster. There's no chance to think, to prepare. It's buy futures, sell futures, when there is no future. We got a runaway train, boy. We got a billion Eddie BarZOOOMs all jogging into the future. Every one of them is getting ready to fist fuck God's ex-planet, lick their fingers clean as they reach out toward their pristine cybernetic keyboards to tot up their fucking billable hours. That's a portion. This goes on for almost 5 straight minutes.
But he's not wrong.
He's not
I'll be
wrong.
honest with you, he's not fucking wrong.
Eddie BarZOOOM absolutely deserves to get beaten to death with sticks.
He's also being chased by predator joggers.
Joggers and demon homeless people.
Right, yes, who become bats halfway through the beating. They don't have to do that. They can just beat the shit out of Jeffrey Jones and I will accept it.
Yeah, no, they kill his ass dead.
I will say the non-belief on their faces when someone says he was out jogging is another, it's not helpful. He doesn't look like a jogger. He doesn't look like he's been jogging regularly.
He is sort of running around like he's not running of his own volition.
And his version of jogging is to go the wrong way, running around the river. Or not, I guess it's the lake in Central Park. But everyone else is going the other way with the exception of the predator runners behind him. So he never thinks to turn around, and it turns out they don't have anything to do with it. They're not there to harm him. It's the two guys who have logs in the woods, and they're within sight of this fucking jogging path. But everyone sees Jeffrey Jones being beaten by two guys, and they're like, my name's Paul, and that's between y'all.
Must be Thursday.
If you've ever dealt with a New York corporate lawyer, I get it.
Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of, as a lawyer, totally. Corporate lawyers maybe sometimes deserve a little.
It is something. I will say, for as overblown as it is, the whole idea of a bunch of BarZOOOMs waiting for their opportunity to hit their keyboards and make names for themselves and do the worst in this world, that's not a lie. That's not.
It's not, but it's interesting how that's changed. Like, you know, it would have been perceived then as being that sort of white-collar, upper echelon C-suite, you know, lawyers and executive class.
Sure.
But now it's tech moguls and app creators and Mark Zuckerberg. The villain in 2025 looks very different than, I guess, how, you know, maybe I would have thought, or we would have thought in 1997 a techno supervillain would look like. Elon Musk's man boobs.
Yeah. And I think the flavor of this movie is so deliciously 90s. Because if the film introduces a mix of both fictional and non-fictional characters who are perfectly fine being associated in a major motion picture with the devil, including former New York Senator Alphonse D'Amato, not a good guy. Last time I heard Alphonse's name mentioned in the press, he was recorded yelling at his wife in the hospital. He stopped being a senator after that. Then you have boxing promoter Don King. Now, complicated fellow there. Then you have Jeffrey Jones, and then you get Trump name-checked, and his apartment is featured in this movie where they interview Craig T. Nelson. That is Trump's apartment. And it looks it. They name check him at the party, and then that absolutely Craig T. Nelson is essentially the Trump stand-in here. Although he's giving no time to giving the appearances or persona of Trump outside of being really creepy with his daughter.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think he's describing Eddie BarZOOOM again as this, but there's the phrase 250 pounds of self-serving greed on wheels. And it's like, you know, I'm just saluting that God bless America.
I'd bump it up 25 pounds, but you're absolutely right. It totally fits in. And so the weird millennial moral panic that is also featured in End of Days, that goes for the wilder version of all this, because that you have fridge cat scares and floor pizza, and the ills that are worried about in this movie are entirely supernatural sourced until they're not. It's an interesting mix because so many of those monologues, if you just closed your eyes and not worry about whom he is talking about in the situation, as you noted, seem rather prescient.
Yeah.
I would say if there's any major issue with the movie, it is the same thing that is kind of that early 90s problem that happens after the horror movie Shame trilogy of Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolf, where at least Dracula wants to be a horror movie. And then Frankenstein's like, we're too good for this. And Wolf is like, what's a horror movie again? We're too busy eating peanut butter sandwiches in front of a melting candelabra. If you want to swim in the Omen's waters, you can't be embarrassed to get wet. And it's not to say that this movie isn't campy. It's high on the intentional camp scale. It's just that it's also competing with actors doing real acting work alongside of there, because I don't find any part of the Charlize Theron plot line to be particularly campy. It feels very real, and they want that to be haunting and scary and out of control. And, you know, as Joshua mentioned earlier, having that tinge of Rosemary's Baby to it, it's hard for me. That's where the movie starts to rub and bump.
Yeah, again, this is a little bit, and I feel like I've been bringing this up a lot lately with the movies we've been covering, a little bit of two different movies happening here.
Yeah. It's not unusual in horror. Certainly, we've covered this a lot.
No.
Horror is that one genre in which you can slip any other genre into along the way, and you still get a lot out of it. But occasionally, you have to have somebody who rides that tone really well. And I'm not entirely sure Hackford is great at high camp. Dolores Claiborne is showing him at his most earnest, and there's so much in that movie that is so good. And it's photographed just as well as this is. This movie looks gorgeous. Even the subway looks good in this movie.
That scene when he steps out of New York and it's just completely empty, 28 Days Later style.
Right, yeah. There's just a ton of good-looking shit in this movie, and it's very autumnal. Any other circumstance, you might look at this, and there's a lot of romantic comedy going on in terms of how he's photographing New York. But then, every once in a while, you get to visit Queens, where someone has some sort of animal murder basement, Gina. I'm assuming these are places you visit on the regular to just get low-cost meats.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
It's interesting. This whole film has that Southern Baptist fever dream shit to it, where it's like, New York City's Babylon. And then the first person you meet in New York City is George Weiner playing a seedy lawyer. You're like, oh, come on, movie? We don't have to do that. George Weiner feels like a real low blow to me. I love watching George Weiner, but I know exactly what character he's playing in every movie he's in. I think the other issue that's odd here is that it takes a lot to make Charlize Theron look bad. But that box perm might be the closest I've seen in a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's funny that, you know, her cutting her hair short and dyeing it black is supposed to be a sign of her, you know, mental unraveling, but it actually looks a lot better.
Yeah, it's like a genuine improvement. It's like whatever's going on there is not helping. And then there's all these interesting signals they give out for her character slowly going mad. And one of them is that she can't choose a paint color for her walls. I think there's a lot deeper problems happening here than a shade of green.
Was that to show her going mad? Or to me, it was almost like that was part of the demons trying to drive her mad, I guess, in terms of, you know, like that overly critical, nosy neighbor.
I think you're correct, Joshua. I think that's more that they're trying to instill doubt in her, and you know, making her feel, you know, making her second guess herself and everything, which is, you know, sort of the start of how you drive someone insane.
Is decorating decisions is where it starts.
It's just you know, like just making them question themselves.
I can buy that. I mean, as a person who only experienced their first panic attack when people started to write down numbers for my house, that part I felt. But they're also not paying for that apartment. They've just been gifted that fucking apartment, and she has to put some curtains up, and it becomes a real problem for her. I will say, though, that my pinnacle of happiness in watching this movie was watching Charlize Theron eat Popeye's children. Popeye's children?
Children?
Pardon me. It's part of the Pooh Blood and Honey movie. It's Popeye's eating his children. No, Popeye's chicken. Yeah, I just enjoyed watching her eat fried chicken. Delroy Lindo is in this, and he's a fantastic actor. I love watching him in generally any movie I see him in. He is saddled with an accent he can also not land, which is a rare for him thing. But he's having a real hard time landing on a locality for that accent. It seems to come and go, and that's before he wears a Barbie's pillbox hat during his trial. It's blinged. It's shiny. I don't know who decided that was the hat to go with. Not that he really had to say anything in his trial, as he gets off scot-free. Question about Al Pacino's dialogue. Quote, "I'm the hand-up Mona Lisa skirt. Are we looking at two different pictures? What is happening here? Does he know something about that portrait I do not know? Is that what's going on there?"
I think the implication is that he's the reason for Mona Lisa's smile.
I would think if your hand is up somebody's skirt, you would want a wider smile than what she's got going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, that doesn't signify someone is pleasuring to me under the frame. That doesn't, I'm not getting that impression.
Al Pacino's wearing a lot of waistcoats. I did really enjoy when they go out on the balcony that has no safety railing, and my heart just started beating out of my chest at the very least. Listen, I'm not going to this for realism or anything, but there should be a safety railing on that that balcony that he has on this giant
pool in his office. Yeah,
where's the fucking water going? I asked
that's a safety hazard for sure.
For sure. But the camera pans down at one point, and you see that Pacino is wearing high fucking heels with his outfit, and you couldn't cut away to his stand-in. Why are we showing off that this guy is 5'3" right now? We don't have to do that.
I think it just means that the devil he's humble. He doesn't mind showing that he needs a little lift.
Another quote that I enjoyed from him: "A woman's shoulders are the front lines of her mystique." What?
It sort of sounds like remember those old Calvin Klein Obsession commercials where like you would just say something completely nonsensical, but it would sound poetic.
Sure.
That kind of sounds like that should have gone in a Calvin Klein Obsession commercial.
I like that. Just in the middle of it, a woman's shoulders are the front lines of her mystique. The guy who wrote this, by the way, Tony Gilroy, also wrote Andor and Michael fucking Clayton. So he's not bad at writing movies. And obviously he's going for something here. And at times it's rocking. I think I don't necessarily buy the plot wholesale. That being said, Gina, I think you mentioned in text, the movie's more of a vibe.
Oh yeah, it's like I said, the plot is nonsense. I'm so glad that they managed to convince Al Pacino to take this role, because I understand his point that no one would suspect Robert Redford of being the devil.
Yeah.
But he's just, Al's just having so much fun here. This is not a role that calls for a subtle, you take on the devil. Yeah, this needs some big show-stopping monologues, and he delivers.
It felt like the twist that he was the devil, or that it even was a twist, that I was supposed to be surprised. And to me, I like that, even though, I guess, traditionally do want to be surprised at the end of the movie. But just knowing Al Pacino's the devil throughout just makes it that much more enjoyable.
When Keanu Reeves is brought into John Milton's office for the very first time on the top floor, his apartment rather, not his office, he looks around and then he mentions to the other guy in the law office, "Is this all one room?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, where does he sleep?" And he goes, "I don't know. Does he sleep?" And then he goes, well, where does he fuck? Later on, we find out where he does. On his desk with just a piece of drapery over it? Come on.
Look, work smarter, not harder, Patrick.
But that's hard. That's you're working with a partner. Sometimes it's alluded to 2 partners for your lovemaking. You want that to do that on a hard desktop? That seems to me like you at least need a chaise lounge. Something with some sort of padding. You're the devil. You can afford it. Allow yourself some luxuries, Beelzebub. Yeah, I mentioned that the book doesn't really have the backstory that Lomax is actually Milton's son, which is it very heavy-handedly alludes to throughout. So when it is actually said...
It is funny to me that, I have a great enjoyment for movies that involve the birth of the Antichrist. But the interesting thing is every single one of these movies that have the birth of the Antichrist as part of the central plot, it is done in a completely different way for each movie. Like in End of Days, it was the devil has to have sex with this specific woman on this specific date. Here, it's the devil's son has to have incestuous sex with his sister, and then that somehow brings about the birth of the Antichrist.
It's just plain math.
Whereas, you've got, what was the last Danian movie, the Final Conflict?
Yeah.
Where he has to, the devil's son has to have anal sex with a mortal woman to bring about the birth of the Antichrist. So it's just, every single movie that does it in a completely different fashion.
But isn't Damien himself the Antichrist? Why does everyone need to go another step down the rung? Why does it have to be the 3rd generation Antichrist? Why? I've never really viewed this as it being the devil's siblings' grandchild as the Antichrist. What, he wants it to look good on his Facebook reels? Why does it have to be so many generations down?
What's that adage in business that the first generation makes the wealth, the second generation develops the wealth, and the 3rd generation blows it all or something like that? Maybe that's what they're going for.
So the fail grandson is going to blow...
The grandson's the disappointment.
Just blow it for everybody. I can believe that, honestly. That's the thing that's made the most sense. So I'm glad you brought it up. At one point, Charlize, and I don't want to say this to make fun of infertility issues, so let's just say that out front. But she lists the reason that she cannot have children on, quote, non-specific ovarian failure, which I found odd because that was the name of my band in college.
It's like, yeah, I don't think that's actually a diagnosis.
I do not believe that is a diagnosis in medicine. It can be in movies, as we have just witnessed. But no, it's just another issue. And she was already body swapping with Connie Nielsen before this. I think Connie Nielsen really gets the short shrift in this movie. She's obviously been hired to be hot lady, but then she's hot lady in a movie with Charlize Theron. And I don't want to horse race their beauty, but it also isn't like, well, Keanu Reeves has a real plain Jane at home. No, he has Charlize Theron at home.
Well, I think the idea is that she's supposed to be unsophisticated. Can't see showing her, prominently showing her eating Popeye's chicken. And
that's what makes her really attractive.
Even in that first scene when he first sees her, I think Connie's character is like speaking Italian or speaking another language. She's very impressive, right?
Yes,
right. And she's just the sort of the naive hometown girl that the kind of woman that makes a very nice first wife.
Yeah, I suppose if you viewed it through the sort of meet your first last wife scenario.
It's the kind of movie where, her cutting her hair short and dyeing it a color much more flattering to her than the hairstyle she had before is to, make her seem drab and less attractive and possibly losing her mind. I mean, she is losing her mind, but also, she's not at the same time.
What's making her lose her mind is all this stuff is real and no one else believes her, to the point where she's just like, the only escape from these people is to jab a piece of mirror into my neck.
Surprisingly rough moment to watch in this movie, which makes it such a interesting, lack of a better reason, roller coaster ride.
If you think about it, it's an exercising of agency, which is the same that Kevin does at the end when he kills himself.
It is an interesting tack that, the only way you can really defeat the devil is to kill yourself. It's like, well, I either go with this or I off myself. That is sort of interestingly, as is the ending of this. Very pessimistic and cynical.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
It's absolutely in that time where it's like, I don't know, the devil's making some good points, sort of, in the schools.
We're even like him making the right decision in essentially giving up his client, but because he seems to be enjoying the attention he's getting for it, now as the devil found another way to kind of insinuate himself into his good graces.
I had forgotten the ending of this until about the 2/3 mark. And I'm like, oh, that's right. This is all like a moment of conscience. He was about to sell his soul and had this vision of what it would cost him. But then it's also, as far as the movie is concerned, this is real. And now Al Pacino gets a second bite at the apple
because before it was greed that enabled him to get to him, and now it's pride. He doesn't destroy the devil. He just sort of puts his plans on hold.
Yeah, he just eliminates that as an ongoing concern. Just ever so briefly, there is a moment in which Keanu Reeves asks somebody to call a character named Melissa Black, but he pronounced it, call a Melissa Black. And you're like, oh, buddy, take two.
Yeah.
Take three.
This was the years when Keanu was trying out accents. And
then we learned this is not something we need from him.
Yeah, and just realized that sort of the vague Southern California surfer boy was, that was fine. That's fine.
Did he use the same accent for the replacements? What's his name? Shane Falco? The same Georgian Southern accent?
It's entirely possible. He also attempts kind of one for Johnny Utah, but he relies more on the straight-lacedness and rigidness of his character over hardcore accent work in that one. Later, during Eddie BarZOOOOM's funeral at a very nice-looking church, Milton appears to be teasing paintings by sticking his finger in holy water. Why is he having a conversation with us? Does he communicate with all art? Is that a power the devil has? He can. Because later on, he has a statue that comes alive and everyone has a fuck fest.
Yeah, he's got that kind of moving painting in his office. It's kind of
it's like the half an apple orgy in End of Days, but it's wall art.
Exactly.
And then when the guy from the feds arrives to ask Lomax whether or not he will give him the information that BarZOOOOOM was about to, Lomax just crosses the street a bunch of times, and then finally the guy gets hit by a car. And I'm here to tell you, that is a hell of a fucking stunt. Whoever took that hit with that car, I hope they got paid well.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. I wouldn't say it compares to the Meet Joe Black bouncing off of 3 different cars.
But that's a digital guy. This is a real guy who takes that fucking hit because he's still moving when he hits the ground. I mean, yes, when I saw that on the lot at Universal, did I stop laughing for 5 minutes? No, I continued the laugh for the entirety of that 5 minutes. And then it got to the point where Brad Pitt does a patois, and that was hard to contain. That was hard. That was a long screening, Gina. And then by the end of the movie, I kind of figured out what accent Keanu Reeves was going for. He's going for Bill Clinton.
I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of lifted a little bit of it from that.
It's very in the culture. It's very of the time. So it's not out of the, it's not completely out of the ether, but it's also such a famous accent and impression that you wonder why you choose that one necessarily. But who would have expected Clinton to come out of Keanu? And then you hear the results and you're like, maybe choose somebody else. But that's where I think he was aiming for, which is not a Florida accent, I might add. Is there anything that we've missed that we really need to dig into that is not BarZOOOOM related when it comes to...
I mean, that is, to me, truly... That is the highlight of the movie. Just watching Jeffrey Jones just gradually lose his shit in this park and like cursing at people who are bumping into him and as you say, like predator joggers, because it is dead ass the predator disappearing and like the sort of air sort of ripples while they're moving through it, and then you just got like two homeless people showing up just beating the crap out of them with sticks. I refuse to dislike any movie in which like the credits are flaming at the end.
Sure. Beginning and end. You get flames on either end of this. Joshua, I think you're absolutely right. Ultimately, when it comes down to this is the perfect TNT Saturday rainy afternoon movie. I think that is the best.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with show like that is that you like miss out on the nudity
and the swearing. Like, I can't imagine the monologue about your wife is having anal sex with her neighbor comes off quite as fun dubbed over on TNT, but you don't know what you're missing in that circumstance if that's the first way you're seeing it. Before we get a verdict, of course, we need this jury to gather together and deliberate how we choose your own death venture, and that is where we decide of the deaths portrayed in the movie. If you were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would it be and why? Now, up for bid, we have shot to death twice by a Trump stand-in. Then you have beaten to death with logs in Central Park, hit by a car because you're not watching one-way traffic in New York City. It's almost as if you have it coming. Or you could slash your own throat with a piece of mirror because a bat lady wanted you to feel beautiful. Or you could have the soul sucked out of your body by the devil. It's some sort of blue smoke situation. It's something out of The Keep. I don't quite understand it, but it definitely happens. And Connie Nielsen turns into a weird statue lady. Or you could just shoot yourself in the head like Keanu does. Joshua, you are our guest, and that means you get to go first.
I was shooting myself in the head over all of the other ones, because then again, I exercise my own agency.
Sure. No, that absolutely makes sense. And, you get to see what transpires as you slowly fall to the ground. So you get to see everything that happens after your decision, which I think, makes it all worthwhile. Gina, what say you?
I think I'm going to take getting the soul sucked out of me and turned into a gargoyle. Because she's very attractive.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of looks at her like everybody looks at Sharon Stone in the Basic Instinct movies. And I just think that'd be kind of cool to experience that for a little while.
No, I agree with you. The way to go here for me is be enveloped with blue smoke that turns you into a weird statue. I think you barely know it's happening, and I get to die naked. My greatest wish.
Yeah.
But that just about does it. We are on socials, mainly on your Blue Sky. Josh Hollis does all of our artwork. Go to RevengeBodyMemphis at Bandcamp.com for this theme and all of our remixes. Of course, you can find us on Patreon, where we're doing bonus episodes like Chat by Chat. We do extra movies there, whether our choice or yours, and commentaries as well. Joshua, where can people seek you out for what you're doing?
You can find me on my website, LastineEntertainmentLaw.com. You can find me on Instagram at LastineLaw.
Excellent. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about movies and television, including some time ago, The Devil's Advocate, on my newsletter, GinaWatchesThings.substack.com. And you could find me predominantly on Blue Sky and sometimes Instagram under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. That just about does it, but don't worry, folks. The body count will continue. For myself, for Joshua and Gina, bye-bye, everybody.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.